Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Hangouts with, I guess I'm doing this with my hands today. Hangouts with James Fee. This is James Fee. This is, I think we're episode 16, but we're calling this a special episode, right, Madeline?
That's right.
So this isn't episode 16. This is a very special episode of Hangouts with James Fee. This one is entitled, what are we calling this one? We're calling this, gosh, I should know the name.
Geospatial Career Panel 2012, Navigating the Field.
If I don't come up with the title, I can never remember what it is. So that's my fault. This is James Fee. I'm in freezing Tempe, Arizona today. And by freezing, I mean it's probably 72 degrees outside, but just know I'm cold. I'm joined today, as always, with Madeline Steele in beautiful Portland, Oregon, where they're, I guess they're blowing leaves outside her window today.
That's right. I think they've let up a bit, but
well, just they knew you put the little on-air sign, and then they knew to be quiet, right? Well, and so today's actually another episode where we've got more than one person joining us. We have three people. We have David, we have Jessica, and we have Kenny, all who are our panel of experts. Whether they're ready or not, they are going to be on our panel of experts. I guess the first thing we should probably do is just kind of explain what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about what it means to, to GIS careers. I mean, people always say, what do you do? And you say, I do GIS, and I guess that means you have a career in GIS. But people always, ask me, say, well, how do I get a job in GIS? Or I just lost my job because my company went out of business. How do I find a new job? So I think Madeline must have come up with this idea on her own, so I'll give her the credit for it. She thought it might be great to have a couple people on in the industry who can talk about, well, what do you need to do? How do you prepare yourself? What do they look for in a resume? What do you need in education-wise? All that kind of stuff. So I think we'll just jump right on in. Let's start with Jessica. Jessica, why don't you introduce yourself and let everybody know what you do?
Okay. My name is Jessica Touchard, and I am the senior recruiter at GeoSearch. GeoSearch is a recruiting company within geospatial technologies, and we work with organizations across the United States and sometimes abroad to fill their open positions. My perspective on the job market is probably a little skewed toward the most difficult to fill positions rather than the most common positions within the marketplace, because when companies contact us, it means they're having trouble locating these particular skill sets, or at least the volume of people that they need. I've worked within geospatial recruiting since 1997, and I've witnessed a lot of changes within the job market over the years. And because of our perspective, we tend to be able to identify trends that are hitting the marketplace fairly early, whether it's in skill sets or in salaries, sometimes in just the general growth and health of the profession. As far as job seekers go, we never charge a fee to job seekers. We keep a confidential database at geosearch.com of resumes that people, whether they're entry level or mid or senior level in their career, can enter their information with us. And we all know we work in a very small niche industry, and everybody knows everybody, so we always handle everything in confidence and make sure that everyone knows where their information is going. We offer complimentary resume reviews to our candidates and often spend time on the phone with them talking about how they could better gear their resume toward their goal position. And we also offer a wage and salary survey to the geospatial community to include GIS, GPS positions, photogrammetry, remote sensing, so all related geospatial technologies.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. And before we go on to our other panelists, I just wanted to make a couple of announcements. One, we do have a page of questions on Google Moderator that have been submitted by various people who are interested in this show, and you can still submit questions for our panel. To find that moderator page, go to weogeo.com/video, and then click the GIS Day link, and then within that page there'll be a link to there. And then from that page you can also join our IRC channel, Hangouts with James Fee. It's just HWJF, and we've got a bunch of people on there now who can chat. So yeah, I guess that's it. Thanks And David, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks. David DiBiase here. Happy GIS Day. Glad to be with you. I'm been at Esri for about a year and a half almost, and before that had a long career at Penn State University, and I've been interested in the professionalization of the GIS field for many years. It's always hard to find a great job, but this is a great time to look and start a GIS career. And there are several reasons for that, I think. One is there's an unprecedented level of employer awareness about the importance of geospatial technology, data, and methods. And there's plenty of evidence for that. One piece of evidence for that is the recognition by the U.S. Department of Labor of a set of new occupations. Madeline, have you got that chart we discussed? Can you put that on?
Yeah, I do. I'll put it up in just a moment.
So, what we hope to be able to share with you is
this the one you wanted to see?
Compiled. That's the one.
It looks backwards to you, David, but to the viewers.
No, that's all right. This is a chart compiled from the Department of Labor's ONET database. You can find that easily online. And what it shows is a list of occupations. The ones with asterisks are newly recognized occupations just identified in late 2009. But what it shows is estimates for current employment and projected employment in geospatial occupations, including GIS. And although some of those estimates are redundant because of the way the Bureau of Labor Statistics works for new occupations, even if you eliminate the redundancies, it points out that the estimate is that there were about 425,000 people working in geospatial occupations in the U.S. in 2010, and that there's going to be a need for about 150,000 new jobs in the next 10 years. So it's a very, very promising time. In addition, another reason for optimism right now is that there's an unprecedented level of professional development resources available for people who are either starting their careers or in mid-career and looking to advance it. And one of those is a document called the Geospatial Technology Competency Model. Here it is. Document. You can get this easily by searching on Geospatial Technology Competency Model, and it makes an outstanding kind of rubric for you to for any prospective or current geospatial professional to kind of assess where they are and identify opportunities for improvements in their skill sets. Now, granted, resources like this talk about the way the field is, not the way the field is becoming. And beyond that core set of GIS professionals is a whole constellation of innovators who are creating new geospatial occupations and new geospatial business opportunities. And keeping up with that, of course, is a challenge for all of us. And finally, I just say that educational opportunities are unprecedented too in their availability and flexibility now, with a great many distance education programs available for adult learners. So there's all kinds of reasons for optimism, and I'm sure we'll explore that in this hour. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, well, Kenny, you ready, buddy?
Yeah, got and clean up. Well, it's good afternoon, everybody from here on the East Coast. I'm Kenny Miller, and I'm the Deputy Geographic Information Officer for Maryland. It's a fairly new position. We're housed within the Department of Information Technology, which is the first time we've married sort of GIS within the IT function, at least in terms of GIS leadership across the state of Maryland. I've been doing GIS for about 20 years, although when I say doing GIS, I'm long since ceased actually operating GIS software. It drives my staff nuts when I call them up and say, how do I do something in ArcMap? Because they can do it in a couple of seconds, and I do more GIS leadership, and it drives them nuts. I've got my first degree was in geology, kind of predating the current version or flavor of what we know as GIS now. From a hiring perspective, I think it's exciting in Maryland that we're finally to a position where we're hiring GIS talent within state agencies. The budget's been such that there have been hiring freezes. Our governor, Governor O'Malley, is a great fan of the technology and using GIS and spatial analysis to better make decisions. So it's encouraging that we get the support to go ahead and get the exception, get the money, and bring folks on board. So I'm looking forward to hearing questions and chatting with folks who are looking to get into this business.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Just again, a reminder for everybody, if you guys have a question, go ahead and ask it on the IRC or go ahead into the Google Moderator. Either way, we'll make sure we hit them. Madeline and I are paying attention. But let's just jump in. Madeline, you want to hit one of the first questions, and let's go with it and see who wants to answer it first. Uh-oh, Madeline doesn't have any sound.
Oops, my bad. I fixed it. Okay, here's the question. What conferences and/or blogs do you recommend to keep up with the most current GIS trends and needed skills? This question is from Careers in GIS in Chicago, and they say that the Esri User Conference is already a given.
Ooh, so they already took out the easy answer. All right, who wants to go first?
I'll jump in. This is Kenny. So I think it's important that you look towards your state and county GIS councils. Almost every state has a council or committee, whether it's formal or an informal group of volunteers. Get to know those folks. They probably meet once or twice a year, and there's probably an executive committee. There may be something in the university, whether it's a geography club or a remote sensing group, and just start to network and meet with your colleagues and share information.
Cool. Anybody else?
Oh, I guess I'd add ESRI, because ESRI has a pretty good network of local and regional chapters. Madeline can talk about her activity with the in Oregon, but my first introduction to the GIS community many years ago in the early 90s was in a local chapter of ESRI, and that was pretty inspiring, and I think is a real good way to get introduced to a local network of professionals.
Yeah. One of the things that we've been involved in the last couple of years has been an advisory board for our community colleges too, and that's an excellent way for employers to have an input on the skills that they're looking for, and then students to really hear those needs in the marketplace as well.
That's a fabulous point, Jessica, and I think if prospective students are seeking out professional development opportunities in universities or community colleges, I think a great question to ask is whether that group has an advisory board. If they don't, I'd be concerned about how well attuned that program was with industry, and I also think, as you suggested, that participating in an advisory board for a local community college or university is a fabulous service for an experienced GIS professional. And if your local college doesn't have one, I'd sure think about asking them why not.
Yeah, those are great. Those are great, actually, recommendations. I was going to say, and you guys hit on it. It's like start local. Find people in your local area, local groups, your ESRI, just general, a lot of counties have these meetup groups, just meet the people around you, because those are the people that have jobs where you live. Those are the people that have experience where you live, and it's always good to have. I mean, no man is an island. I don't know who said that, but, and GIS is not an island, even though there is a lone GIS group out there, but, generally to find, people in your neighborhood, in your city, in your county, and go from there. Right, Madeline?
Some agencies, yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, there's some agencies, if you're working for me like a state agency, you may have, 1,000 folks scattered around the state. It's a good way to get to know your area, the folks, and then you just expand it to broader interest. And in my case, I'm now working with a national group of state GIS coordinators. So it really has led from one step to another to to something that is very useful on a regional basis.
Cool.
Great. Okay. Well, shall we do another question then?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay. This is one that I wrote actually. During a directions webinar, Eric Pimpler of geospatialtraining.com made an interesting distinction between commercial and public careers. He argued that different skill sets are needed for each and that people should decide and specialize early. What do you think? I'd never heard that before, so I was sort of surprised. Do you agree with that? Anyone?
Well, I know Rich Serby has said on several occasions that it's a very pivotal decision to decide whether you want a public career or private sector career because the corporate cultures are so different. And I've even heard Rich say, maybe you've heard him too, Jessica, say that if you deciding on a public career is good if that public sector career, if that matches up with your kind of your personal work style and personal inclinations. But he also pointed out, I believe, that that decision could preclude you from a private sector job later on because the corporate cultures are so different. Am I getting that about right, Jessica?
We hear that from employers, and obviously that's a bias depending on who you're talking to. Some people, if they have the right technical skills, they don't care really where they come from. Some employers say, we have tight deadlines and we work under pressure and we travel a lot and all of these different things that public sector person may not be accustomed to. And sometimes they're eager to do it. Other times they said, no, I like the culture that I'm in, and I like working with the professionals in one setting. So it is, I think, a different culture. I've seen a lot of people transition from one to the other. However, I think there is kind of a personality for each style that they tend to either stay in one or the other too.
So you think it's more of a culture or work style issue rather than a technical skills thing?
Yeah, most of the time. I think that for most positions, it's probably a work style issue. There are some that there's advancing technologies faster sometimes in the, I would say, corporate sector. And so sometimes they're not keeping up, but for the most part, it's about personality and style.
And lifestyle, yeah, I think that's right. And as someone who has recently made a shift from the academic sector into the private sector, I can say there's definitely lifestyle implications for that kind of move.
Yeah, it's all about profits.
Right. So as a public sector person, and most of my career has been in Maryland state government, I did spend some time in the private sector in the oil and gas sector. But you're right. I think it's not as much skill sets as the willingness to put up with some of the things that go along with state government. I will say that in the last 6 years, that the pace of government mirrors, I think, some of the pace of the private sector, at least the way our governor is pushing to implement and use spatial technology, even if we don't have a budget for it. The excuse of, well, how am I expected to do something with no budget doesn't cut it. We still need to produce a map, produce an analysis to do new systems. So it's really pushed me outside of my comfort zone, but that's a good thing. At least I keep telling myself that.
Yeah, and B. Lord Castillo in the IRC channel echoes that comment, Kenny. He says, public sector cultures are also extremely varied by themselves. A large county is extremely similar to corporate sector.
Sure.
That's probably true, especially with processes and red tape. So the smaller the company, the less tape of any color.
Awesome.
James, do you want to pick us another question?
Let's see. What would be a good question? So we've asked. Okay, well, here's one. This has sort of been something that I've sort of banged on a little bit. GISP, is it worth it? And just by asking it that way, I've given you my opinion on it. But I want to hear what other people say. I mean, Jessica, I mean, are people requiring a GISP? Kenny, I mean, when you see GISP, does that mean anything to you? And from an education standpoint, David, does it matter? You know, why don't you jump on? Let me know.
I don't see it required very often. I do see a lot of the things that those people learn within the certification required. So I guess it's, you know, the title isn't always required, but if you have it, it kind of tells an employer, tells a recruiter, I know these things. And at least you know they have that basis, I guess. So no, I don't see it being asked for by name, but a lot of the things that people learn within that certificate program are valuable. So I guess I don't have a preference as long as they learn it, but I think the certificate doesn't hurt anything, like any professional
Fair enough.
designation.
Well, I admit to being biased as a former president of the GIS Certification Institute, but the reason I got involved in that is that I feel very, very strongly that it's a great positive for our field. It's kind of like what John Kennedy once said when he said in his only inaugural address, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." The strength of the GSP is the strength of the profession. I think the notion of a public commitment to professionalism and to ethical practice and competence is good for profession and good for society. I also think the fact that it's a recurring certification that requires continuing professional development is good for everybody. It's good for the profession and is good for individuals. But I'm perfectly willing to admit that the evidence is piecemeal about whether that commitment pays off for individual practitioners in their career advancement. But I think that there's a greater issue at stake. There's a community issue, and I think that personal commitment to professionalism is, in the long run, going to be very valuable for the whole community.
Yeah, David, excuse me. I would agree about the level of commitment that it shows that you take into your the pride in your profession to pursue getting the certification. From a hiring standpoint, I'm much more interested in the education background and then what kind of experience you've got. We're not putting in the requirements, GISP, even desired, but it's something that becomes a tipping point if other elements of an applicant's experience are similar, right?
Yes, and I have seen that before. If it's, you know, a toss-up between two people, the certificate will help you in the end. Just like a degree or whatever, no matter how many years of experience you have. Yeah.
And it's a relatively new certification program, the GISP, and I would guess that as we roll through the purely application process to become certified into, you know, some sort of merit-based, that I think it's going to mature, much like the GIS, you know, industry has in the last 20 years. So.
And what about the ASPRS certification? They've got several different tests that you can take, right?
That's a big one. Certified photogrammetrist, especially, right. That's a big one because I think that contracts require it. They must require a signature or that kind of person and that's probably what will happen with the GISP. If contracts start requiring that certification, then it's going to be a big deal. For years we've seen we need a certified photogrammetrist.
Right. Or a licensed land surveyor.
Right, or a PE.
You know, or a PE, right. So show me that seal.
Well, so okay, so here from the chat, someone said, what about the ESRI software certificates? You know, that's a new thing that
Yeah, so the ESRI technical certification is complementary to professional certifications such as that offered by the GIS Certification Institute and ASPRS, and they're really complementary. They're not in competition. The ESRI technical certifications are extremely useful for demonstrating one's mastery of very particular software tools, and that's valuable to employers in some cases. but that's no substitute for the kind of professional certification that involves a commitment to ethical practice and ongoing continuing professional development.
Right.
Okay, cool. So here's something that we were talking about last week or last month. Is GIS having an identity crisis? You know, a couple of people have been talking, including me. What does it mean to be a GIS analyst? Is it required? Is GIS turning into word processors? You know, button pushers. You know, I think that's a very large problem. It might even be happening right now. So I guess from an education standpoint, you know, what can students do to prepare themselves for the real world when they come out and then someone says it's not just about clicking next on a wizard, you actually have to perform analysis?
Yeah, well, you know, James, there's no, it's hard to find classes in whatever university or college you go to, classes on innovation, right? Because innovation requires that intersection of technical experience and business savvy and recognizing opportunities. And so preparing people to become innovators and to help invent the future of this field and the future occupations that are rolling out can only happen when education and industry intersect in synergistic ways. And that brings us back to the discussion we had earlier about the importance of industry advisory boards to education programs. It's extremely important that industry and that education be open to input from industry, and that industry be able to provide the kind of input that can actually be actionable within a higher education context. And the document that I talked about before, the Geospatial Technology Competency Model, is an industry-vetted set of recommendations about the core competencies required for success in the field now. Notwithstanding your point about the fact that our field is evolving in very exciting ways, in ways that can even lead us to talk about an identity crisis. That's the challenge for new people coming into this field, is that they have to help invent it. It's not a static field.
Yeah, I mean, well, Kenny, what about you when you're hiring people?
You know, I've thought for quite a while that I'd like to get past the label of GIS, and I am looking for folks who can do spatial analysis, who can deal with developing geospatial databases in partnership with local governments and state agencies to push up to the feds as part of a Transportation for the Nation program or Parcels for the Nation. So, you know, I have a mix of skills, and just coming out with, you know, a geography degree doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, I want a database specialist who understands spatial databases, as well as somebody who can push the buttons and build me a model for decision making, as well as working with partners in collecting, integrating data into one database model, building the transformation tools that create a bi-directional from the state down to the locals, locals back to the state program that then becomes self-sustaining. So David's right. I mean, you really end up piecing together, you know, educational components. If your strength and you like programming, there's plenty of demand for people who can write scripts or develop, you know, codes. I mean, just the litany of acronyms on programming languages that people in answer GIS jobs with is amazing. So there's room across the board to build what really excites you.
That's probably our #1 demand, is the scripting, like he said, with a GIS. And in terms of an identity crisis, I can tell you from experience that employers really don't want programmers without GIS. I've tried that. So there's still a very important key. That spatial thinking, that spatial knowledge is very important, no matter if you're a programmer or not.
Okay, so I just want to say, everybody listening, did you hear what she said? She said, it just being a programmer, you're not going to get you a job in GIS. You need to know GIS too. So there you go. So I guess there's another question here I saw in here. Should all GIS professionals learn to script? I think clearly, yes.
Yes.
You're not going to get hired.
And all scripters should learn GIS.
Yeah, there's certainly students should expect of themselves not just to master tool use. They should expect to be able to at least customize, if not build, tools of their own.
Yeah, in the IRC they've been calling them mouse pilots. So don't be a mouse pilot.
Right. Right. I think that even in sales positions, we are getting demand. This person must understand code. They're not going to be writing code every day, but they need to be able to talk to their customers about what this can do and be realistic about how a software development team can meet those needs. And so understanding the script, whether you're in, even in project management, even in sales, throughout the geospatial spectrum, you will need knowledge of that now.
So that sounds like a pretty unanimous conclusion that we should learn to script if at all possible as GIS professionals. Do you guys have any advice for how to get started for people who haven't done it yet, or students?
Well, it's easy for me to sit here and say, learn scripting, because I can't script. And I don't, that's not part of my job description. But I know there are a variety of online resources, self-paced. And I suspect a lot of scripting, if you've done some programming, which a lot of us have, it becomes a lot easier to pick it up than if you just don't understand how putting code together works. That becomes a little bit of a challenge.
I'd like to point out that over 1,200 higher education institutions around the world have ESRI education site licenses, and under that site license agreement, students are eligible to take virtual campus classes, select virtual campus classes at no charge, including our Python class online. So virtually any student in a higher education institution in the U.S. or abroad is going to have access to that, and if they don't know where to get it, they should ask their professors, where do I get access to that class that I'm entitled to?
Right, and we're trying again with the advisory boards in your universities and your community colleges. That's what we're trying to do, to make sure that the educational community understand employers need these skills and add this into the curriculum. Yeah,
and a lot of the universities have free courseware online, like Penn State. David, I actually got started with Python using the free courseware from Penn State, and it's wonderful. Highly recommend it.
I know my old friends at Penn State are probably high-fiving each other now that you mentioned that, Madeline.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, for those that are in the IRC, there's a couple links being posted there. We'll make sure they're on after this post, so people can go ahead and see all those links.
And just to be clear, that doesn't mean that because you learn scripting that you need to become a programmer, because I know that there's a lot of interest in other areas of GIS. It's just a tool in your toolbox. It's not necessarily going to box you into that type of position if that's not what your goal is, because that's often the fear.
If I can refer.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, James. Just one last point on that. If I can refer back to the competency model once again, under the core geospatial competencies and knowledge, there's a whole section on programming application development, and one of those that I'll read briefly is identify alternatives for customization and automation, such as APIs, SDKs, and scripting languages. And what that suggests is that above and beyond the simple skill of being able to craft scripts is that meta knowledge about recognizing when scripting is appropriate and useful. So it's not just a question of being assigned a scripting task, it's knowing when a scripting task is appropriate and will advance the interests and the success of the organization.
So let me give you just one real case example of why I think understanding how to use code, scripting, whatever you want, to affect an end. In Maryland, we're working with the power utility companies to automate power outages by zip code. right? The utilities generally will not give out address level information. And so I'd love to have the ability to reach out to the utilities, help them write an XML script that they would push out either as an RSS feed or an XML feed or whatever, so that we're not manually every 4 hours collecting information that is emailed to us to put up on the map. That we, as often as a power company decides to send out that formatted information, we would just consume it and map it in a totally automated.
Yeah, and you got to be able to script, and that's why scripting is so important to GIS. Yeah. It's funny, I was just looking in the IRC, Brett had this interesting comment, and I sort of want to say yes to his question. During my undergrad, I was part of an experiment to combine geography majors with computer science majors. Should university geography majors add computer science requirements to their major? And I would say yes.
Yes.
I'm not saying get a minor in computer science, but there are clearly some core computer science classes that you can take, 100 level classes that will teach you what you need to know to be a successful scripter in GIS.
And we're a IT industry. We're a software profession, so it's just very important to understand how that software works.
One fine point I'd add to that, and agreeing in principle, but there's a important distinction between computer science and information science. And at many institutions, there's an information science program allied with the computer science. And realizing that computer science as a research discipline is interested in speeding up algorithms and hardware, and that base research is not always directly applicable to what we need to be successful in the geospatial field. I think alliances with IT, with information science programs, are likely to be more valuable and more synergistic, perhaps, than computer science per se.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a very good point. Just don't take a Pascal class just because you can. I took one, and I don't think I ever used it in the real world, but sometimes there is good content out there for you to take, especially when you're in a university setting. You're already paying for classes. You might as well take advantage of them. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but in taking that Pascal class, and I took one too. I haven't used it anymore either. But it imparts a certain degree of understanding on how to communicate with the computer, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a lot easier to do that than it is to do assembly coding, and I've done that too, and that's a whole different mindset.
Oh, bless your heart.
Well, that was part of the old program. But to follow up on what David was saying, if I can remember that piece. So you're bringing together IT skills with the spatial analysis piece, and now more than ever the web piece. And we've in the less than 12 months that I've been aligned with the IT department, we've forged these alliances and are really making improvements in ultimately the products that we're making decisions based on. So in that sense, it's been a great move. To be right down the hall from the web team and the guys who do network security and set up our virtual servers and all that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah, well, that's what's so fun about GIS, right? Because you get to touch all these other disciplines, all this new technology. You get to do classic scripting, you get to do analysis, you get to do database programming, you get to do web development. That's why we all love it, because there's something new every day. Okay, here's an interesting question that I actually kind of like. This is by Lindsay. She asks, what non-GIS specific skills do you think are most important for individuals wanting to pursue a career in GIS?
The first thing that comes to my mind is communication and the ability to speak with customers, whether those customers are internal in a public agency and they are other departments, or those customers are people that are going to use your consulting firm or whatever your professional situation is. I think communication, both written and oral, are very, very important.
Yeah, I agree completely. You have to be able to write an abstract or a memo that the governor can read simple language or a letter on his behalf. And you need to be able to talk to folks, whether it's partners, customers, and do so in a way that, is convincing that not only can you deliver what you say, but you know what you're doing. And my mom and dad always told me be able to talk real good and write real good. Well, in addition to everything else from a technology standpoint, you have to be able to convince somebody that your way is a good way to go.
Oh, looks like David, I can't hear you. Are you
sorry? That's that mute thing again. Thanks, Madeline. Yeah, the three foundational competencies that we value most here at Esri, number one is definitely communications, written and oral. And I should say, we all say communication skills are important. Well, how do you get them? It goes way beyond just having a class in communications. The best way to learn to communicate is to read a lot. And I hope that many students who are aspiring to leadership positions will realize that reading has to become a lifestyle if you want to become an effective communicator. Second is the second competency foundational at Esri is the ability to work in teams. Every project of any substance requires lots of people to work together from lots of different backgrounds, and it's seldom easy. It's difficult to make a team effective, and the ability to be effective as a team facilitator is an extremely valuable competency. The third one is one that you might not think of right away, but that is your willingness and your ability to put the interests of your organization ahead of your own interests. And that's kind of, to put that in plain language, I'd say is like being a grown-up. Being able to realize that the reason that you're employed is to help make your organization successful, which makes everyone successful. And that's a learned trait. That doesn't necessarily come naturally.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's interesting. What about you, Madeline? I mean, you weren't trained GIS. Right? What did you learn that you're bringing into your career in a GIS world?
Well, actually my undergraduate is in English, and I did work as an editor at an archaeological firm for a while. So I've got that sort of technical writing thing, and that's a nice thing to have on your resume. Yeah, and then of course doing research and just writing technical documents. Not necessarily that we're all geospatial, but I think that
yeah, if you're a GIS person and you're in a science, biology, archaeology, things like that, if you can write, you will do very well for yourself in that career. I mean, there is a extreme shortage of people in the GIS profession that can write. So if you can write, you can almost write yourself a check because people will pay you a lot of money. All right, well, here's another question. Do you think there's a distinct GIS profession, and if so, how would you define it? Is GIS a tag that people use to search, or do we all have careers in GIS?
Well, David's recent article has got a nice little graphic of the geospatial profession here. I'll put it up real quick, and he can talk us through it. So, David?
Okay, yeah, well, thanks, Madeline. Yeah, well, I would argue that there definitely is a GIS profession, even though this has been a matter of contention and debate for quite a number of years. There are multiple definitions of what a profession entails. The one that I think is most relevant here is what the Department of Labor calls a learned profession, and some of the aspects of learned profession are having a distinctive body of knowledge that's been articulated. That's certainly true of our field. That has specialized professional education. That's certainly true in our field and is growing very rapidly. And that has some kind of credentialing mechanism. As pointed out earlier here today, credentialing in the GIS field is still relatively young. I dare say immature, but it is certainly evolving, and there are thousands and thousands of people seeking those credentials. one last item that really distinguishes a profession from just an occupation is a kind of an ideal, a sense of a common purpose of how we make the world a better place. For medicine, it's to promote health. For law, it's to promote justice. I think the thing that's lacking from GIS as a mature profession is a consensus about what that ideal, or that social ideal, is for our field. But I think we're right on the verge of that now. You certainly can't miss hearing a social ideal for GIS if you attend a plenary session with Jack Dangerman at the user conference, because he has one every year.
Yeah, oh, cool. I mean, I consider myself a GIS professional still, even though I'm probably, got my fingers everywhere. What do you do? I do GIS. So clearly, I think I define myself as having a GIS profession, and I think a lot of people do, even if it isn't cool to say you are one.
But it also means that you just can't walk into any position that's labeled as GIS and perform it adequately. I mean, the profession it's become so broad that I could no more be a true database analyst in the geospatial world, than I could be a GIS operator.
Yeah, we work with so many different companies, and every time I hear the word, we need a GIS developer, even that, there are database developers, and there are web developers, desktop developers, platform people that make LBS platforms. I mean, there's just, and the languages vary, and so being, and then of course we hear from companies that specialize in energy or environment or retail applications. So even though they're all using the GIS software and they're all using this technology we refer to as GIS, every single client we work with is looking for something different, and and how they model their business.
Yeah, B. Lord Castillo asks a related question: is GIS as a profession splitting away from geography? And if so, will they eventually come back together? And I noticed this myself in my master's program in geography, that there was a lot of tension between the GIS people and the geography people, who felt like the GIS section of the department was like growing too quickly, and it was like trying to take over geography. So that was pretty interesting, actually.
Those crazy GIS people, all they want to do is make money. Oh man. Well, okay. So here's a good question, and they were sort of talking about this in the chat, and it's something I was talking to a friend of mine last week. Is how does somebody create a portfolio and share that of their GIS skills? I think about programmers. When someone says, "Hey, can you review this guy? Is he a good programmer?" Immediately I go to their GitHub repository and see what they've been hacking and doing stuff. But I'm not so sure there's that sort of option with GIS people. Some of them have GitHub, some of them have FTP sites, some of them have little GeoCities pages that they put little animated GIFs on there. I mean, do you guys have any suggestions to people that want to probably, get some sort of portfolio out there to share with people?
Wow.
Oh no.
I don't know how much of it is confidential sometimes and that kind of thing. I hear that from candidates, like, I could show you, but then I'd have to kill you. I don't know. It depends on the industry. I mean, that obviously would be more in the defense sector and that, but a lot of the work they've done, they can't show anyone. So.
Yeah, I always take that though as a cop-out.
Could be.
That you can I used to work in defense, so I totally know what you're talking about. And especially when you do work for a client, the client owns the work you did.
Right.
But that still doesn't mean you can't spend some time to take what you did or the skills you learned and create something, for a nonprofit or just something. There was a guy who shared this. Well, I haven't blogged about it yet, but some guy shared that he loves trains and how trains move around the country, and he's been doing some GIS analysis about trains moving. How do you move, things from the ports in LA to Chicago and New York? And, I'm thinking this is, he's doing it because he enjoys it, but I'm thinking this is a great example of how he can use all these different GIS tools and point to it. Say, hey, look, there's a website, there's a database, there's Python code, and he's having fun doing it. So I don't think there's any reason why people can't pick, how much they love the San Francisco Giants and talk about it all the time.
I think that's a fabulous suggestion, and volunteerism is another way that individuals can strengthen their profession and increase the likelihood that they're going to have a prosperous and satisfying future. That's a great suggestion, James.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got a friend.
I think
to take. Sorry, Kenny. Go ahead.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that if you're interested in cartography, you should always bring a map sample with you. And I've got a friend who set up a nice multi-scale web map on Mapbox. You can do that with TileMill, and they've got a small free account where you can make a little multi-scale map and put it there, and that's nice to show people.
Yeah, there's a lot of options. I mean, there's ArcGIS Online, there's Mapbox, there's WeGeo.
That's right.
Not to toot my own horn. I mean, there's lots of ways out there. There's Google Maps, My Maps. I mean, there's plenty of ways you can showcase stuff that you've done. The one thing that I think of when someone says, "Hey, can you review this person?" is the first thing you do. You type their name into Google and hit enter, right? And
yeah,
so
that's the truth.
Everybody who's looking for a job, do that, and make sure only the good appears on the first page.
I'd say too that the work products people create are not always the most compelling evidence of their capabilities. Testimonials sometimes are more powerful. That is, it's not the tool or the product, but the difference that it made for an organization. And so I wouldn't be shy if I was up and coming about asking people if they'd be willing to provide a brief testimonial in one form or another about how a young person's work made a difference for their employer or for a volunteer group or anybody.
Yeah, I mean, someone just asked in on the chat, what's the best way to find volunteer opportunities as I go back to meeting up with local practitioners? And I'd say that it's easy to start locally, but then there's organizations such as Humanitarian OSM, who I hope to have on this hangout at some point to talk about that. I mean, it's the one thing. There's plenty of opportunities out there. You just have to decide what you like. What you enjoy doing, because just like with a job, you don't want to. I don't want to be a street sweeper because I don't like using a broom.
And
so
let's be sure to remind people to consider GIS Corps. The group organized by ERISA that recently got a presidential recognition for their work in providing GIS expertise in emergency operations worldwide.
Yeah, and you'll see a lot of small cities and governments are looking for help too. That they don't have they don't have any GIS. They know they need GIS. They don't. I mean, you can volunteer. Some of my mom's family lives in very small towns in South Carolina, and I know they don't have GIS departments. So being able to volunteer your time there and saying, look, we'll map all the fire hydrants for you, or we'll map all the whatever they need, they're interested in.
That is about the best advice I've heard for someone to break into the field that doesn't have an immediate job opportunity, or even a formal internship opportunity, is to. And I've advised multiple students over the years to go to their county office and say, "I've got some mapping skills. Can I contribute these to advance some project at the local government?" Yeah. Great advice.
Yeah, it is great advice, and it goes back to something we talked about earlier, and that was knowing your local GIS Council chapter, as another resource to either support the volunteer or the internship work that you're looking to do, and which agency really needs help. So, yeah, that's great. And I was thinking about, we were kind of traveling a segue from volunteering, and it certainly goes right into internship. How do I get experience? I got my degree, I've got some programming, scripting, CSS, whatever. How do I get experience, right? I mean, and it can be difficult. Internship doesn't always mean you get internship dollars, but if you're in this for the long haul, you need that experience. It's a great way to get it.
Yeah, that's cool. Here's an interesting question, and this is always, I think, difficult for a lot of people. Do you have any tips to making a resume stand out? You know, Kenny, when you're looking at resumes that come across your desk, I mean, what catches your eye as somebody who's pulling them out of the pile?
I like short, succinct bullets. I'm not interested in reading, a paragraph. I think in the last, 2 weeks ago, we reviewed about 37 resumes, and a paragraph full of acronyms on all of the software that you can code. I'm toast. I mean, really, you got my attention for maybe 45 seconds, right, on a resume, and I'm either going to be intrigued and want more, or it's like, here's, I got a whole stack of these things. I want to put them in the I don't have to deal with you pile as soon as I can. I mean, that's the cold hard truth, right? So make it short. Give me your education. Give me your experience. What do you want to do? If I'm advertising a job that wants outreach with county governments, and you're going to be collecting addresses from 24 jurisdictions, and I want somebody who understands databases and is experienced with addresses, I'm interested in seeing a resume that talks about your experience in outreach and address databases and address issues. Okay, so you have to tweak your resume. Don't give me the one that's heavily focused on all IT stuff, because that's going in the I don't want to deal with you pile.
Amanda wants to know if you think objective statements on resumes are a good idea.
I think a resume is a evolving product. You need to have a resume is exactly what Kenny said. It is a way to screen you out. A resume is not your friend. It is a way for somebody to say, nope, they don't have what I'm looking for. And so what you want to make sure that you're doing with your resume is creating, obviously, a shell that has your basic skills, and that may be in a form of a list. But when you're talking about any experience you have, whether it's in a job or it's in a project at school or an internship or whatever, then you want to talk about how you use those skills, because I see a lot of resumes with a big list of skills, but in their job description and what they've done in the bullet points that Kenny was referring to, there's no talk about how I used ArcGIS, how what we did with ArcGIS Server, what we did with these different tools. And when you're looking to apply for a job, I think kind of reiterating what Kenny just said, look at what the job is asking for. Have you done this before? If you have, make sure you tell that, because a lot of times it's not Kenny who's looking at your resume, it's an HR person who doesn't know GIS from anything. So she's just looking for ArcGIS Server. Yep, they have it. They need to know these certain skills, and they're just comparing a job description to your resume. They can't infer all the time that you may know these other modules, or you may have done addresses with that tool, because a GIS professional may know that that's often used for that, but an HR person's not going to know that.
David, do they teach resume writing in college?
Yes, but not in a systematic way. I'd say in idiosyncratic ways from institution to institution. But I really like Jessica's comments about HR, and I've got to harken back to this geospatial technology competency model again, because even though higher education institutions may be slow to pick that up, human resources departments are not so much slow. In fact, Los Angeles County just this year has reclassified 200 positions in county government as GIS jobs using terminology from this competency model. So one suggestion, given that possibility that HR people are going to be reviewing the first screening of a resume, that's certainly going to be true with ESRI. In most cases, I think maybe structuring those bullets so that they align with competencies identified in the competency model might not be a bad tack.
Interesting. Oh, Jessica, what about LinkedIn? Where's that fit in all this?
Well, I use LinkedIn a lot, and LinkedIn is used for professional development. It's used for sales in some cases, but if you are using it as a job seeker to find a position, I think there's ways that you can create your profile to be more like a resume maybe than somebody who's not really actively seeking a new position or just looking to connect with other professionals. So sometimes that's inherent in the structure. You can check I'm looking for a job, or I'm actively in the market as one of your tags. But in addition to that, you're going to want to list a lot more about your technical abilities and such if you're looking for a position, because people like me are going to be out there looking for keywords and that kind of thing, and you want to be able to come up on those searches. So that's one of those searchabilities. And then when we came back, one thing that I wanted to mention too is these days almost every resume or LinkedIn profile obviously is electronic. So if you do have samples of your work, like we were talking about, linked somewhere out there, link to it. Make sure this is an interactive document that somebody can get to know you and your history and your knowledge a little bit.
Yeah, and I just wanted to give a message to students that it's a great idea to take advantage of your university or college's career counseling center. They will almost always go over your resume with you and help you refine it.
I think it's also important to state that it's not all bad news about not having direct experience on your resume. By that I mean, if you can relate aspects about your volunteer work, the work you did during summers, if it involved leadership skills or team building or other things that you applied that have a direct application to the kinds of jobs you're looking for, by all means state them. I'm not as much interested in knowing that you worked in a lumber mill and you kept all your fingers all summer long. But if that job required certain skills that are applicable, absolutely put those down.
I had one person just get hired this week. I got an offer letter, and that was because he really kind of fell short of the skills they were looking for, although he had some of them. But his eagerness, he went and learned SQL before the next interview. He went out and he educated himself. They said, SQL's something we're really looking for. And he says, I don't know it very well, but I've learned this much in a week since I've talked to you last time. So just an energy about you, an interest in what they're hiring and in what they're doing, it will set you apart. And don't apologize if you're a new graduate. Everyone's a new graduate, so you don't have to apologize in an interview about, gosh, I don't have this experience. Tell them what you learned. Tell them what you did. And explain, the skills that you can bring to the table and those that you're looking to learn.
Yeah, that sort of segues into the next question I was going to ask. This one, sometimes getting that first job is next to impossible, or it feels next to impossible. What advice do you have to people to get that experience that you clearly need to get a job? I mean, the hardest thing, once you get your first job, it's all gravy, right? It's all easy after that. Well, maybe not, but that first job is the most stressful one to get because you don't know what you're going on. I mean, what do you guys recommend for somebody?
I recommend launching your own personal marketing campaign, and that includes LinkedIn. That includes, we have a product that we offer called GeoSearch, which is basically name, addresses, phone numbers, emails of companies in your state that hire within Geospatial. But it's making a lot of connections, and it's really putting yourself out there probably more than you'll have to after getting your second job, and that's because you're introducing yourself to a whole community at this point. So visiting your counselor, your career center, visiting local groups, like we've said, serving on advisory boards, volunteering. It feels like a lot, but that's really how you get started.
There are so many examples of some young person in high school or in college, a summer job, an intern, paid or unpaid. If you're in the workforce, then you're already around people who hire folks. And if you do a good job in 3 months, chances are maybe during fall break you can come in and get some more experience. And you know, it's just example after example of somebody who's been at a company for 5 years or 25 years. Gee, I got started as an intern, then I got a contractor position, and then I got a full-time position. You know, it's just being exposed, and that's the trick. And Jennifer said it, you know, whatever it takes to get in front of people to show that you've got a great attitude, you've got skills, you know, there's no substitute for doing that.
In addition to what Kenny and Jessica have said, I think it pays to think, for a job seeker to think like a geographer, and to realize that there's a national landscape of GIS career opportunities. The most fundamental aspect of that landscape is that where population is higher and where population is growing, there's more likely to be GIS job opportunities. And also, there are particular geographies associated with particular industries that hire GIS people. For example, right now, as Jessica probably knows better than I, opportunities related to the energy field are strong. And who would think that there'd be GIS jobs, that Houston would be the capital of GIS jobs opportunities at the moment, or that North Dakota or even central Pennsylvania would be places where there are GIS opportunities related to energy. The same goes for defense, commercial applications, government. Think like a geographer, be knowledgeable about where those jobs are, and be willing to move.
Yeah, the more flexible you can be on location, the more opportunity, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, what about midlife career-changing people, you know, older job seekers? I mean, what about them? I mean, we've been sort of focused on people without any skills, you know, but what about people that either, you know, they were a nurse and all of a sudden they decided they wanted to become a GIS professional? I mean, what can they, you know, what can they do? How do they prepare themselves? Obviously, they've gotten, you know, certificates or degrees in Geospatial. You just don't say one day you're going to be a GIS person, but what can they do to help themselves out?
Well, this is why James said why the distance education programs for current aspiring GIS professionals are the real growth area in formal higher education, is because there are many, many thousands of people who aspire to either advance their career or to switch careers into GIS, but are not mobile and who have family commitments to community, and who may already have jobs. And so they are flocking to some of the distance education opportunities that have emerged. And those have a benefit not only in helping people develop the skills and perspective they need to be successful in the field, but it also builds for them a community of folks with similar aspirations, where they can, and ideally a connection to an industry advisory board, as we discussed earlier, that will plug them into all kinds of inside track opportunities. So I think that aspect of the education landscape, the distance education component, is what's really responsive to the need of continuing adult professionals or new entrants. I happen to think that people who are changing careers are some of the best prospects for our field, because they bring perspective along with a skill set.
Yeah, it can get tricky though, because I always, you know, when I'm talking to these people who are coming from something that's completely different than GIS and went to and got a GIS certificate, for instance. You know, there's no way to really, unless they have some very good initiative, like they have a lot of business development background, or they have something like that where they could slide into one of the many career paths that Geospatial has to offer a little easier just with that knowledge. But if it's a technical level, it's very hard to start anywhere from technician or analyst level with only a GIS certificate. So depending on where they're coming from, it can get tricky in terms of salaries, because they may be coming from, you know, gosh, I make 85 now and I'd like to be a GIS technician. Well, guess what? What GIS technician do you know making $85,000 a year? You know, so it's a little easier, you know, I think sometimes when you're starting out at a college level, but you have to do basically the same things that a new graduate has to do. You have to get out there in the community, you have to show your background, and how that relates, like David said, can be very valuable. The perspective is valuable, but you have to understand that better than they do and explain that to them in terms of what you bring perspective-wise to their organization.
Good advice.
Yeah, I would add that, you know, James, to take the example that you gave of, you know, a nurse or somebody in the healthcare field, there may be a lot of opportunities to leverage existing skills and knowledge about the health profession. You don't necessarily need to go to, you know, a different coast and completely change, you know, the idea of, you know, electronic medical records, and, you know, at least in terms of government, and I would defy anybody to say different about the healthcare field, 80% of all that information is location-based. You know, whether it's where diseases are located or individuals and whatnot, that there's a lot that can be done kind of around that, you know, original education base that you got.
Yeah. Well, how about this? I'm either, you know, a new student, or I want to become a GIS. So I'm going to get my certificate. What do you guys think are areas that I should be thinking about? I mean, we talked about databases, we talked about scripting. You know, let's just say I just want to get into GIS. That's not enough. What areas do you see as the growth areas of GIS in the next couple of years?
Okay, I'll start off with that. Good question. To realize that there are most geospatial jobs are embedded in some kind of substantive discipline. For example, right now there's a great number of opportunities related to energy, energy of all sorts. There's been especially since 9/11, a lot of opportunities in defense, specifically geospatial intelligence. One of the fastest growing areas for GIS use now is commercial applications within retail, real estate, businesses of all kinds. So I think one way to approach this task is to think about what kind of substantive knowledge does a prospective worker bring to an employment opportunity beyond GIS? What do you know about a field, or what field are you interested in developing knowledge in that's complementary to your GIS specialization?
Yeah, it's a tough question, but I think, you know, we talked about this earlier. You got to do what you love, and if you don't love, you know, I could make a lot of money doing something I don't like, probably, at least in theory, but I would be miserable. You know, you're always talking about these jobs, you know, you make a lot of money, you're thinking, oh man, I can't do that. So, you know, if you want to make a career, you have to love what you're doing, otherwise you won't stick at it. So I think it's whether you're starting anew or you're doing a change, especially if you're changing mid-career. You know, if I'm changing when I'm 40, I better sure as heck really want to do what I'm doing, you know, to throw away what I was doing before. So, you know, I would say if you like, you know, animals, you know, biology. If you like dirt, maybe go archaeology. If you like oil, you know, energy. I mean, we could make this all, yeah. If you like driving your car.
If you like money, go into energy.
Yeah. If you want cheap gas.
And move to Houston.
You know, if you want government holidays off, work for the government, you know. Whatever works. You know, I don't know, and you know, it really
was a cheap shot, James.
I know, but I used to work. It was one of the you know, I used to work in government, so I know. I had to think of something clever, but you know, I think it comes back. I think it's that simple. You know, you gotta really enjoy what you're doing. If you don't, you're never going to survive. You know, that's the minimum thing.
And GIS touches every industry. And this, yeah. You know, and if it's not there yet, you could probably bring it in there. One of the interesting trends I'm noticing lately has been insurance GIS, and I don't know where it's going. I don't know if it's going to hold out, but we've had several inquiries about that specific type of application. So I don't know.
I'm good. That's a good point, and I appreciate what you said, James, about needing to love what you do, and that reminds me of my career in higher education. From a practical perspective, it wasn't necessarily the subject that inspired students. It was the individual teachers who told them about the subject and who made it come alive for them, and that puts in mind for me a suggestion that GIS professionals who get involved in whatever way in their local higher education institution and who have access to students and tell them inspiring stories about the opportunities available to them in the profession is going to make a real difference. And fortunately, many, not all, but many higher education institutions are becoming much more open to the idea of involving what some call, what we call at Penn State, practitioner faculty in their curricula. And those people really have an opportunity to make a big difference in people's lives and to connect them with a future that they can indeed love.
Hey, Kenny. People want to know what the heck is next to your calendar. So behind you, turn around. What's that to the left of your calendar?
That's the Wizard of Oz's scarecrow.
All right, that's what people are really interested in the IRC. So there you go, guys. It's a scarecrow for the Wizard of Oz.
That's my theme song. If I only had a brain.
Oh no.
Okay, I'm going to take this moment to give a requested shout out to the GIS lab at Miami Valley Career Technology Center. Chris, there's your shout out. Woo!
Keep dreaming, people. No. Go ahead, Jessica. Or Madeline.
Oh no, go ahead, James.
Well, I was going to say, this is interesting, and you had written this, Madeline, and I think it's actually might be interesting to hear everybody's on the panel's response to this. Paul Ramsey, who I absolutely love because he's another of these guys, a good writer.